Hello, I'm Coach Leonard Bishop. The podcast for this week, and we're talking about winning in life. My guest today is Coach Nicole Collins, former Baylor athlete, as well as Baylor grad, and now head coach at Cedar Hill High School. Welcome, Coach.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Coach, at age 7, I was involved in basketball. Tell me a little bit about yourself as far as your growth and when you started and progression.
I would say, I learned to play basketball from my dad. And probably my earliest memory was Little Dribblers. It was with, the church community league. And I guess my parents knew at that point they had a handful on them, because I just remember I was the first and only kid that ever got a technical in Little Dribblers, because I got so upset because we lost a game. I slammed the ball. So I had to learn my lesson from that. But from that point forward, obviously some things changed and shifted. But I just always had fond memories of basketball.
And one of the things that as a coach that I always talked about is the thing that you need to learn first is how to dribble and then shoot. What are your thoughts?
Oh, I definitely agree with that. That's how I was taught. That's what my dad taught me. And I think obviously being smaller and undersized, that was something I had to be really good at. We focus on ball handling first and then shooting. Because a lot of times I think if kids don't have access to a smaller goal, it's going to be harder for them to have good form, and they develop bad habits. And if you don't catch that pretty early, it's kind of hard to really break that with kids. So that would be what I would recommend.
I agree with that 100%, because if they end up developing bad habits, it's so much harder to change. And kids, as you state, if they don't shoot on a smaller goal, they throw the ball.
Yeah,
because they're trying to get there.
Yeah.
And that, it gets to my next point is I have what I call the 4 steps to shooting. Tell me what's your thoughts about shooting the ball.
You know what? I think the most important thing is, and I think this gets overlooked by a lot, and I actually was not caught until college, is what you're looking at. A lot of kids, if you don't pay attention to this, they actually watch the ball first. So when they're shooting, they're watching the ball. But if you pay attention to anything else where you have to aim, you don't aim at what you're throwing, you aim at the target. And so I think that's one of the biggest things, is making sure they understand, make sure your focus is on the rim. And then of course, that comes back in. Some people do beef, some people do kiss, the different steps on that. But just, obviously your form, I think it starts also with footwork. I think sometimes people overlook that with shooting, because as you get older, the faster you want to be able to get a shot off, that also is affected by your footwork. And I think footwork is an important part of shooting form. So I think people sometimes get fixated on how the ball is being held, and how it's coming off the rim. Coming off your hands. But I think don't overlook the two, or at least that's what I was taught, and that's what I learned. And I do think that's helped a lot of what you're looking at and your footwork, getting that really secured first.
That's very good. I agree with that totally also. And I think that, oftentimes what you have to do is to tweak it. It
sure.
might have a little bit going wrong, or as you stated, footwork is very important. Placement of how you hold your feet, and how far apart, and how straight it is, and all of that kind of stuff. Yeah. And as a coach, I know you constantly does that.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Tell me a little bit about your high school career.
I played at what some people know as Pasadena Dobie. It's in the Houston area. I was there for 4 years, 4-year letterman. And I was blessed to have had a very successful career. Left out of there scoring over 1,500 points. Unfortunately didn't win a championship, but was able to take my team, pretty far into the playoffs. But, I just, I was blessed that I think I was brought up with a mentality of being very resilient and pushing through. And I didn't have a team where I had anybody else that was a Division I or Division II or Division III player, so I understood for our success, it was on me. And I learned how to be a leader and learned how to be a better basketball player, of how to carry a team. So I think that really kind of helped propel me for college and moving forward, and even for college as well.
And I see what you said. You started or played 4 years of varsity basketball.
Yes, sir.
Well,
yes,
that
sir.
in itself is a heck of an accomplishment. And as I stated earlier, this is called winning in life. And for something of that nature, that's definitely a win. Yeah. So congratulations to you
Thank
on
you.
that.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
And onward to Baylor.
Yes.
I'm sure that was an awesome experience.
Man, the thing I say to kids all the time, I think college is like one of the best times of your life, you know, because it's like you're still young, you think you're independent, but you're still very dependent on your parents, but just really still trying to figure out who you are. But in terms of just basketball, the basketball side of it, we were in the Big 12, and at the time that was one of the top conferences in the country. So playing competitive basketball night in and night out, getting to play against some of the best players in the country. And we kind of went through a little bit of a roller coaster ride in my career. So when I went to Baylor, we were like really trying to break through the surface of being in the top 25, like kind of right around 26, 27. And freshman year had a solid year. I mean, I had to get adjusted to not being the star, like most freshmen going to college. Like I didn't start. I think I was averaging maybe 10 to 12 minutes a game. So that was definitely a transition, but we had a solid year that year. And then our sophomore year, we lost a lot of our seniors. And so we were really young. And I mean, we got handled. I mean, it was a really, really, really rough year. And I mean, not proud to say, but our record, I mean, it was bad. It was really bad. We finished in the 12th spot in the Big 12. And then we got a new coach. Kim Mulkey came from Louisiana Tech, and it was her first head job at Baylor. And just everything from that point, just culture, everything shifted. Just what she demanded of the players, got some new kids in. One of our girls who ended up eventually becoming a Kodak All-American, Sheila Lambert, and literally turned our record completely around. So we ended up going 7-20 to 21-7 the next year. And I think finished in the top 5 in the Big 12. And by my senior year, we were the runners up, and we were ranked as high, I think, as number 7 in the country. And that was like pretty much at that point in time, broke every record that Baylor could break at the time. So definitely was a big part of the foundation of what eventually became a national powerhouse at Baylor.
Yeah, I'm somewhat surprised at how that happens. And
Yeah.
I give you an example is, TCU. A year or 2 years ago, they were bad. Now I think they're either 1 or 2 in the Big 12. So how do you look at the Big 12 now compared to when you were there?
I think it's, obviously much different, because believe now it's 16 teams versus the 12. And, I think it's still very competitive. Obviously not quite as tough as the SEC. But just, different coaches have come in. They're getting different types of players, but I still would say that, to compete in the Big 12 is still a huge feat, and it's still a huge accomplishment for any kid to get in there. So, I just think to see the turnaround too, though, of what TCU did, that was a big thing. It just shows when you get new coaches, get a different culture, get the right kind of players that fit a system, what you can see in that accomplishment.
Okay, let's talk academics a little bit. What was your major in college?
I was forensic science major and criminal justice minor. And I was actually pre-med. My plan was to go to medical school. God had a different plan for me. But yeah, I absolutely loved it. I really enjoyed it. And I believe at the time, Baylor was the first university undergrad that had a forensic science program, because that was normally something you had to do in grad school. And so got to do some really cool things in terms of some of the classes we took. So I really enjoyed what I did there, but I didn't end up using it.
Forensic science to coaching.
Yes.
How did that happen?
God. I mean, literally, to make the story short, I still had a really good relationship with my high school coach. And I remember coming back to him after I had graduated from Baylor, and I took a year off. I deferred, and I was like, I just kind of need to figure out, like, is this what I really want to do? Because we all know you can't play any games if you're going to go to medical school. And he came to me, we went to lunch, and he was just like, hey, I think you would be a really, really great coach. And I just laughed at him. I was like, no, that's not what I want to do. I don't want to coach kids. I don't want to coach basketball. I love kids, but I don't want to coach them. Like, That doesn't even sound fun to me. And he just had told me that he had just got back from the UT women's basketball camp, and he had met a coach who was looking for, you know, someone who knew basketball, but who also had a resilient enough personality that could deal with the kind of area that she was coaching in. And it was Andrea Robinson, who was at Dunbar, who then went to Cedar Hill, who had a successful career at DeSoto and then at Faith Family. And it was in Dunbar, in Fort Worth. And we know that's, you know, it's not the easiest of areas to be in. And I just was like, you know what? I guess I could go on an interview. Why not? And so I drove up to Fort Worth because I was in Houston at the time. And she offered me the job on the spot. And I just decided, well, you're young. Try it for a year. If you don't like it, go to medical school. And I just fell in love with it. I fell in love with coaching, but I had never seen that for myself. I'd never seen being involved with basketball. I loved it. I loved playing it, but I just never saw that for myself. And I just feel like, you know, that was something that was definitely God's hand in it. Cause I mean, clearly I haven't left, and that was 20 years ago.
So God had a plan.
Yes, he did. He definitely had a plan. Uh-huh.
Because walk us through you mentioned Fort Worth Dunbar, but that's your first job?
Yes, that was my first
your
job.
Stops to
stop
get
6.
to Cedar Hill.
Yeah.
Now, walk us through your stops in coaching to get to Cedar Hill.
Oh, my goodness. So, I mean, and that's the thing. I got spoiled as a young coach because I walk into Dunbar, and here it is, got a McDonald's All-American and Brooklyn Pope. Our whole starting 5, all of those kids would end up going Division I. And that was really before you started seeing that in high school. And so we win a championship, and this was going on their second one. We were runners up. And then the next year we won a championship. So I'm literally being exposed to, hey, this is what we do. You just go to state, you know? And so I then got an offer to be a JV coach because I was the freshman coach at Dunbar, and I went to Summit, and I was there for a year, and we actually made it to the regional finals. So one step from state. And then Coach Robinson got the head job at Cedar Hill, and she asked me to come back and be on her staff. And so I decided, okay. So I was at Cedar Hill for 3 years as an assistant coach. And while at Cedar Hill, I loved it. I just fell in love with the community. The athletic director at the time, Gina Farmer, just had a really good relationship with her, and was able to be mentored a lot by her. And I was just like, man, I love this place. And so it actually was her who was like, hey, like, if I ever have a job at Cedar Hill to offer you, I'm coming for you, but you got to go get some head coaching experience. And so after being at Cedar Hill for 3 years, I took over at Capel. And what I didn't know at the time, I was actually the first Black head coach that they had ever had in the history of that school. And that was a pretty big deal. And so I was there for a year, did a solid job, but we did not make playoffs. And then I took over at North Crowley for 2 years, and we made the playoffs, but we lost in the first round, and Cedar Hill became open the year after that. And so Gina Farmer called me, and she said, I told you if I had this job, I was coming for you. And so the rest was history there. And I've been at Cedar Hill for the last 11 years. And I can't even believe how fast time flies.
Congratulations, Coach.
Thank you.
Proud of your accomplishments and all that you've done for Cedar Hill, as well as the athletes you've been with.
Thank you.
Yeah, I forgot one thing we talked about when talking on the college level. I saw where 1B or 1.
It wasn't many. It wasn't many. Yeah, I was fortunate that I made the dean's list every semester that I played, and I did not make many Bs. My parents didn't play that, and that was also something just me. I always wanted to try and be the best at everything I did, so I took my academics very serious.
One of the things that I've always tried to instill in my athletes was you want to be a well-rounded, hardworking, self-disciplined athlete. Yeah. And so, needless to say, you were definitely that.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And that's an accomplishment in itself.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the thing that I always try to tell my girls is like, I feel like And I know some people may not agree with this, but I do feel like you see a reflection of who a kid is in the classroom as well as on the court. And if you're the kind of kid who will cut corners and just do enough in a classroom, I think that there's going to be some areas of that would be exposed on the court. And so just really big on be your best in everything that you do. Don't settle for, just because, oh, I passed, so now I can play. But if you're capable of straight A's, then do it. Don't just do enough just to get by. So I'm real big on that, trying to get our kids to strive to be, have a spirit of excellence in everything they do.
That reminds me of a saying that I read a book, Les Brown said, it's not over till you win. And one of the things he said in that was that all you can do is all you can do, but make sure you do all you can do.
That's right.
And that's the
right.
thing there. We'll be back. One of my granddaughters played for you at Cedar Hill, and she talks highly of you.
Yeah.
And so, and I tell the coaches today is that when I was coaching, I really didn't pay a lot of attention to what I was just trying to do all I could do.
Yeah.
But since I've gotten out of coaching, so many former players and students have come up to me and talk. So what do you try to instill in your students mainly about life?
Oh man. That it's always bigger than basketball. I heard a coach say a long time ago that at some point the ball stops bouncing for everyone. So even LeBron James is going to stop playing basketball one day. And the question is going to be, what did you learn while you were playing basketball? And I think the question that coaches have to ask themselves is, what did you teach this kid? Because if a kid can only say, you taught me how to do a step back, or you taught me how to do a drag back cross, I just think you failed as a coach. It's more about, what did you teach them about how to conquer in life, how to win in life, how to understand that life is not always going to be cotton candy and rainbows. Like and that's for every person. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter your race, your sex, doesn't matter what you've been blessed with in terms of wealth. You are always going to be hit with some adversity, and how are you going to respond to it? And I think that that's the beautiful thing that we as coaches know, like that's what sports does. It gives you so many opportunities to teach those life lessons, how to respond to adversity, how to work with people you don't necessarily like, how to submit under authority, even when you don't like how your coach is getting on you. So I just think there are so many lessons that you can teach. So I just really would say just the life lessons. Did you learn what you were supposed to learn? And did we as a coach, and specifically did I as a coach, do my job of trying to prepare you for that?
That's good, Coach.
Yeah.
I know that, as I stated earlier, the show is winning life.
Yeah.
And as far as, tell me some of the things that you try to instill in your players, like 1, 2, 3, things of this nature that will allow them to be successful, not just during their playing career. And as you stated, when the ball stops bouncing, what's next?
I think the first and foremost, my faith is a big part of who I am, the journey that God has taken me on. So learning how to trust in God, learning who God is, and learning how to trust in him. Because I just personally don't believe, I don't think you can make it in life and be successful without God. I just don't think those two things can be separated. So not trying to force that on them, but trying to make sure that they see him in me, and the way that I deal with them, the way that I coach, the way that I talk to them, the way that I deal with other people. And I hope that, I've done a good job in that. And then learning how to trust the process. I think that's the really tough thing that sometimes I, even as a coach, have to remind myself, because we can get so fixated on the destination of winning the championship, getting the prize, getting the medal, getting the ring, that you miss the moments to get to that point. And I think that's what life is about. Life is not about the end, because the end, we're not here. It's about the journey. And I think learning how to trust that process of the journey. And I think also learning how to enjoy the moment. I think that is definitely something, as a more seasoned coach, I do better now than I did before, and trying to teach kids, like, just be in the moment, which I think for kids, they kind of do a better job of that than I think sometimes adults do, but just enjoying the process. Like, sometimes, practice is not always fun for a lot of kids. It was for me. I actually am that kid who loved to practice because I knew that meant I was going to get better. But a lot of kids don't enjoy practice. They don't enjoy the conditioning, but learning how to enjoy what is going to get you to the point of what you're trying to get to, which is to be the best of the best. And just love people in the process. I think that would probably be my fourth thing, is just making sure that you don't forget what everything's about. And, I think that comes back to faith of God. Just, God is a God of relationships. So it's about building relationships with people and not losing sight of, you're just there to win, or you're just there to become an All-American. You're doing this journey with people. So, learn how to love people. Yeah.
I like that a lot.
Yeah.
One of the things that I always say is that conversation is therapeutic. I have a friend, and whenever we talk, he always mentioned the fact that, conversation is therapeutic. What's your thoughts on that? Just interacting with people.
For sure. I don't because I don't think we weren't meant to do this alone. I think we're supposed to have moments where we step away and you do some internal reflection. But I do think that, definitely life is about relationship with people, family, people that you come across. As we call it, we used to say protecting the crew. The crew are people that you do life with. They may not necessarily be your best friends. They may not be necessarily people that go down the line with you, but these are people that you do life with. So I think it's really important to be able to just kind of do life, converse, learn from, listen to, engage with the people that you're doing life with at the moment.
I like that. You mentioned listening to, and I always say one of my sayings is that listening is a skill.
Definitely.
And if you, and one of the things about I would say about, people ask me oftentimes about Chris Bosh. I said one thing that Chris he was a good listener. With size, in basketball, size is
it's a good thing.
Needed. Yeah.
It is.
So if you're a good listener, and then you have size, you got a good chance of making it.
Yeah, you do.
And that's what helped him get to where he is.
Yes.
One of the other things that I mentioned, you mentioned faith.
Yes, sir.
And I always say that you definitely have to have a relationship with God.
Yeah.
I can remember reading an article. And I think it was Whitney Houston or a couple other singers in the Ebony magazine. They talked about, all of the glamour and money and stuff, but they still weren't happy.
Yeah.
And what they figured it out, or somebody had mentioned to them, was that they had to have a relationship with God.
Yeah.
And I'm proud that you mentioned that to the audience, and I try to help my athletes understand the same thing, is that I feel like you always need to be reading a book, always. And one of the books need to be the Bible.
Yes, yeah. I definitely agree with that. So
tell me some of the other books that you've read that you feel that was quality for you.
I think one of the best books I ever read was Battlefield of the Mind by Joyce Meyer. And it's Christian, scriptural based, and just talking about the biggest struggle that I think we as believers as well as non-believers go through, of just the biggest battle is in here. It's not what other people are doing. It's not even what other people are saying. It's about, just the internal conflict that you sometimes have with yourself, running off thoughts that are not healthy and that are not of God, and, breaking down belief systems that maybe were taught to you that are not healthy and that are not going to help you strive and be successful in life. So that was a really, really good one. I'm trying to think what else recently. I've just actually been reading the Bible recently, so I haven't read any off top that I can think of, but that was a really big one for me that stood out.
I like that too. Also, it's one called, as I mentioned before, Les Brown said, "It's not over till you win," which is a very good book. And I feel like if you constantly read, then you're going to always have good things to say because you're reading good books.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier, as far as the coaches are concerned, sometimes though the players, the only book they read is you.
Yes.
So
Yes.
if you're saying the right things and doing the right things, and as Dr. Martin Luther King used to always say, the time is always right to do what's right in making decisions. So that in itself is really a good way of handling this situation.
Yeah.
Right.
I just think that that's also just kind of tying that back to God is like why it's so important to have that foundation, because there isn't anything else that's stable like him, that doesn't shift like him. So if you're leaning on him, you're learning from him, you're getting revelation from him, that helps you to be the version of you that he intended you to be, that he created you to be. So now you can set those examples, and it's an authentic example of who you are representing to these kids. And it's not, I mean, obviously we're all flawed vessels, but I think like when there's a strong leaning on him, that just kind of helps you. So that's one of the things for me that I try to do my best of just making sure that I'm sound on that.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
What do you think that's a little bit different or could be done a little bit different that would allow more of the student athletes or regular students to be successful in the classroom? And I guess according to where you are too, though, because I'm talking about, I'm Lincoln in the hood and stuff, and I'm looking at our kids, and that's what I'm trying to do, figure out what can be done for our kids to instill in them.
I mean, I'm one to say kind of what I feel. So I just, my biggest thing is this doesn't necessarily fix the problem, just commenting on it, but I just don't understand. And I do understand, but I don't understand why do we continue to run a system that does not give a productive product? Like you look at education in Asia, you look at education in Europe, and you see a very different product when kids come out in terms of their reading, comprehension, writing, critical thinking ability. And that's not what you see in America. So my thing is, it's very clear the system is flawed and it's time to change it. So I know that's not really answering your question because it's not giving the solution, but I just think that the system itself is flawed. I think one thing I would say that maybe needs to be changed is just stop teaching to a test, because that's what it seems like we do a lot of now. We do a lot of teaching to tests.
Huh?
So I don't know. I think that that's one of the things. Kids are tested so much. And I mean, obviously we know you got to test kids. I mean, it's just like, that's what the game is. We do more practice than we do games. So we got to prepare for the test, which is our game. But I just think at the end of the day, what I see a lot of, it seems like we just do so much testing versus actual just teaching. Teaching, preparing kids. I would like to see a lot of classes that, and I don't know how it is in other districts, but classes that you've seen kind of, dissipate and disappear, come back. Like health. That is, I don't know how that is a class that kids are not getting in middle school, elementary, and in high school. I know in some districts you only get it in elementary, or you only get it in middle school. I mean, because that's dealing with like social, mental, emotional, spiritual, all of those different levels and different types of health. I just think that there's a lot that can be done in terms of changing and improving the system. I think in terms of coaches, what we can do, the part that we can do, because we can't change the whole, is holding, like I said before, just holding our kids accountable and trying to teach them what it means to have a spirit of excellence, to not just try to be good at just your sport, but to be good at being the best at what you do. So, taking pride in learning, taking pride in becoming a better writer, taking pride in becoming a better reader, taking pride in your grades. Like, you know what I'm saying? Trying to just take pride in those things and I think that's the part, just doing what you can do, like you said.
Okay. And as far as social media and cell phone and things of this nature, what effect do you think that has on the school system?
I would say overall, not a positive one. And when I say that, I do think social media is an incredible tool that can be used in such a wonderful way, because obviously it's able to get, news out and get it out immediately. It's able to highlight things that are being done in a positive way. But I just think, me personally, I was able to go to school and not have a cell phone, and my parents were still able to get in contact with me. Me personally, I mean, what do kids need cell phones for in class? I just don't think that's something that should be allowed or prohibited, because it's just a distraction. It's just a distraction. And that's really what it's meant to do anyways. And so me personally, I don't think it helps students. I don't think it helps them, when they're trying to learn. I think it's a very big distraction for them.
Yeah, I agree with that totally. Yeah, but one of the things that I talking to the students is that if you notice, Google can tell you anything.
Very
so
good.
if it utilized correctly, and I guess that's where the problem comes in.
Yeah.
How can you utilize it when it's necessary, and understand that it is not one of those things that you keep in your hand 24 hours a day?
I think that comes back to what I was saying, is that are we really producing high critical thinkers, And I think if you're not learning how to critically solve problems, learning how to think for yourself, then you get on Google and you believe everything that you see, you believe everything that you hear. And I think that's one thing that kids have to learn, is that everything that you see online, everything that you hear online, it's not necessarily the truth, or it's being positioned in a way to push an agenda that's not necessarily the truth or what they want you to believe. And so I think that that's something that maybe the younger generation has to get better at seeing. And I think that that's something we have to do a better job of trying to pull out of them, is learning how to think for themselves and learning how to, use their critical thinking skills.
I agree totally, Coach. And one of my things is that conversation is therapeutic, and my conversation with you has definitely been therapeutic. And I appreciate you, and keep on doing what you're doing.
Yes,
you're
sir.
highly successful at what you're doing, and I know the students are benefiting from your being around them.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you.
I enjoyed it.